I'm Glenn McGuinness, and this is Outburst. This week, should the provinces have more autonomy from the federal government?
I don't want the federal government telling us how we should live or do our farming, our logging, our fishing, and all that type of thing.
I think a central government can be counterproductive sometimes.
The way I see it right now, the federal government is doing a fabulous job in supporting the provinces.
It's all about working together, folks.
But first, as COVID numbers rise in certain parts of the country and restrictions are tightened in those places, many Canadians are preparing for a second wave. We've seen the federal government spend billions of dollars to help stimulate the economy during the first wave. But as the numbers are rising in certain places once again, the endless work of putting stability into the lives of Canadians will continue. So, as we move forward through the pandemic, what more could the feds do to expand on what they've done so far? Our question.
How could the federal government improve on its response to COVID-19?
I'm not sure about that. I've been very appreciative of all the updates that the health people have given us. I've also been very grateful for the guidelines they've given us. I'm not sure what more they can do. We have to take the responsibility upon ourselves to follow. I feel they have worked very hard to keep us safe. And in Saskatchewan, we've done well. And I'm grateful for that. So I don't have any complaints. And besides that, I think our Prime Minister is the best looking guy around. That really doesn't matter to you, but that's what I think.
I think they're doing a pretty good job. I think that all three parties probably should come together, or four parties should probably come together, deal with this as a national crisis rather than a political crisis. It's sort of upsetting when I see some of the parties try to use this for political gain, and I don't think this is the time for political gain. I think this is a time where we actually probably should have all four political parties come together, make a concerted effort, and get everybody in Canada to work together.
I don't know about the testing and everything else, but you hear about, the immediate testing out of the U.S. And so I think that that could be an answer for a lot of people and a lot of companies and so on.
I think the federal government has actually responded quite well to the pandemic. I mean, it happened so quickly, and you have a very limited amount of time and resources to deal with the seriousness of the issue. So I think people need to view the response also through that lens as well. But maybe moving forward, they can make sure that people who are receiving CERB payments are actually doing their best to pursue employment. But again, that's a lot easier said than done. So all in all, I think the federal government has responded appropriately.
I don't think it's any more that they can do. They've provided us with everything that we need to know, but there's just people that aren't listening and aren't taking it serious and aren't social distancing and doing that type of stuff.
You know what? I think they've done a pretty good job, the feds. I think they've done everything they can to sort of help the situation as it is right now. And I guess they're going to deal with everything as it comes, one day at a time. So I don't really see anything different as far as I can see at this point.
Find out who's suffering financially and find a way to help them out, and just have a way that somewhere down the road you can catch anybody who might be cheating.
I'd like to see the faster COVID tests out and more available to people, because it's stressful if you think you're sick and you don't know you're sick and what you should do, and I think we can be more responsible there by having faster tests more available to everybody.
I think they could have more of a long-term plan for what's going to happen after all of the aid stops coming to us Canadians. I don't feel like there's a clear plan for what's going to go on afterwards.
It's a good question. It's depending on how people are affected. Different people have different answers. Because I'm salaried and it didn't impact my salary. There's not a whole lot I can comment on that, but I will say anything I can do for restaurants and small businesses. I mean, just being asked this question on Elgin Street, knowing what they went through with the construction and now COVID-19, I think anything they can do in that regard would be super helpful.
As a student, I think it'd be really important to help out a little bit more with like student loans and like grants and stuff, because I wasn't able to work during the summer, and that's how I get my income for school. And so having had a little bit more fundings and stuff for it, it would have helped out a lot, I think.
What I'm hearing, there are still people traveling in across borders and all that. You know, a lot of movement. That's gotta get tighter, and and there, like I said, really this pandemic really is a tough one to kind of gauge. But us citizens, we have to do our part too, not just rely on the government to fix everything for us. I think something like a federal mask mandate back in March or April would have been very helpful in stopping the spread of this disease.
I really don't have a magic solution. I think it's day to day. They have to deal with each crisis, and this is a worldwide crisis. It's not a Canadian problem. The problems they're having in Britain are the same as here. Not enough testing. The politicians kind of hijack any good news story and downplay anything that's negative, even though it's realistic, like the school problem right now. So I don't have the answers.
It's an unprecedented situation, and when I compare the Canadian response to other countries, I thought it was excellent. I think we could have done a little better with people that were coming back into the country, ensuring that they self-isolated in a better way. I know of people that didn't do that. I think the initial response on some of the government programs was maybe not necessarily well targeted. But the way they did it with using existing programs was excellent, and they responded as government change, as input change.
For the most part, I'm very enthused about our response, especially compared to a lot of other countries. I will freely admit Justin Trudeau is not my ideal prime minister, but I respect the fact that he has gone out in front of a camera every day to say, this is how our country is doing, and this is how we plan to move forward. And as a leader, I have to say bravo to him. That was an amazing job of trying to provide leadership in a challenging time.
Provinces looking for more independence from the federal government certainly isn't a new concept, and it's alive and well to this day. Quebec, for example, is looking for more of a say when it comes to immigration in that province. And out west, Saskatchewan and Alberta have made no secret about their desire to renegotiate their position in Confederation. We sent our cameras out across the country to ask Canadians how they feel about this topic. Our question:
should the provinces have more autonomy from the federal government?
Personally, I think so. I'm not a big fan of big government. So I think more personal autonomy, even at the local level, where they can handle things for better or for worse, depending on the situation, where they can handle things as they arise, because every place is different. And I do appreciate that decisions have been made that are stricter in certain regions and not other regions, and I think that's really smart in situations like that. There's no reason why economies in regions that aren't affected by COVID should suffer when they don't need to.
I'm actually American. I'm a dual citizen, so I come from the United States, where each state is quite autonomous. That can obviously help in some ways, but it can also create more tension in other ways. I guess I would need to know specifically what the autonomy is for, but I think in general, if it's something that's really not regional based, then it should probably be in line across the country. But there have to be considerations for different regions and local economies. Yeah.
Tough question, because if you get a premier that wants to do whatever they want to do, it can take your province away from what Canada is so good for. And I don't want to name Quebec, and I don't want to name Kenny and Alberta, but I think we need to stay part of Canada. Otherwise, provinces could go different.
I think there's new things that need to be negotiated, like climate change and some of the environmental things that weren't in our original constitution. They need to be talked about and figured out who's going to be responsible for those things.
I don't know. Yeah, a common Canadian sort of status quo for things is important, but the provinces are so different. BC versus the Maritimes versus the North versus Ontario. I think it's important for the provinces to maintain a lot of autonomy because their needs are so different.
I think so. I think a central government can be counterproductive sometimes. It's too much bureaucracy, you know, and we got to go back to Ottawa to get stuff that they don't understand what's going on out here. So yeah, I think the province should have more powers. And the federal government should be an oversight thing, maybe in charge of fisheries, maybe in charge of the military, and maybe in charge of the environment to some degree. But, you know, for day-to-day stuff, I think that should be more of a provincial jurisdiction.
It depends on what the topic is. I mean, overall more autonomy. I think they have a lot of control over healthcare and everything else. I think the powers that are distributed now are fine. And I don't think that's the focus right now. I think the three levels of government have been given their control, and they know what their mandate is, and they're controlling it very well.
I think that depends on who's running the federal government. I don't think the federal government we have now is doing our country any favors. So right now, yes, they should. Once we get a better party in government, maybe things will be better for the provinces in general.
There's no right or wrong answer on that. We need good provincial and federal leaders. And BC and Canada, in my opinion, do not have that.
I like the Canadian model. I think provinces should have the autonomy that they need in order to make the local situation work for them. I don't think the federal government should be involved in things where the province knows the situation best, except in an advisory or in a way that will help facilitate a response.
I think central government should pay more attention to diplomatic and self-defendant, that kind of affairs. And for the local health, local economy, the Premier should pay more attention and have more freedom to do. Yeah.
Yes and no, in terms of I don't want the federal government telling us how we should live or do our farming, our logging, our fishing, and all that type of thing. But we also pay quite a price to the federal government for transfer funds. And so we expect that we get that kind of assistance back from the federal government. If we don't, then I would see that they interfere or intervene quite a bit because they have a very high hand over the top of us for that. I do think we do need assistance in that respect, but that's because we're not entirely independent yet.
The way I see it right now, the federal government is doing a fabulous job in supporting the provinces. I'm not sure that certain provinces could get more autonomy and survive. I really don't think so.
You're getting into who's on first base and who's on second base. It's all about working together, folks. It's all about working together. Who cares on first base and who cares who's on second base? If you don't work together, it doesn't matter who's on first or second. You will not win the game. You will not win the game if you don't know who to throw the ball to.
No, I think we definitely need the federal government's backing for the provinces. So we definitely need the federal government, backing up the provinces. So, your thoughts?
Yep, I agree. Absolutely. Good answer.
In which year was Nelson Mandela given honorary Canadian citizenship? 1995, 2001, or 2007?
2001?
I think 1995.
95.
Yeah.
95.
1995. 2007.
1995?
2001. 2007.
2001. I'm just going for the middle.
It is 2001.
Oh, okay.
You're brilliant.
Thank you. I try.
In 1962, during the apartheid era in South Africa, Nelson Mandela was arrested and convicted of conspiring against the South African government and sentenced to life in prison. He would remain there for 27 years before his release in 1990. Mandela's relationship with Canada has always been warm, and Canada was his first visit abroad following his release from prison. During the 1980s, Prime Minister Brian Mulroney broke ranks with other Western nations to impose sanctions on South Africa if apartheid was not dismantled. a move which would later influence other nations to do the same. Canada lifted those sanctions in 1993. The following year, Mandela was elected president of South Africa. On his final visit to Canada in 2001, Nelson Mandela became the first living person to be given honorary Canadian citizenship.
While our healthcare system remains under threat from COVID-19, Canada's opioid crisis is growing as well. Over the last 4 years, more than 16,000 Canadians have died from an opioid overdose, with 1/3 of those in British Columbia. This addiction affects people from all walks of life and does not discriminate when taking hold. So we asked Canadians what ideas they would have to help bring these numbers down. Our question:
what could be done to help combat Canada's opioid crisis?
Having overcome an addiction myself, I'm still overcoming it, I can understand where these people are coming from. Addiction is not just opioid addiction. There's many addictions out there that need to be dealt with. Opioid is that is something relatively new compared to alcohol and other drugs. So it is something new, but it's all part of the same parcel. What's causing it? How do we deal with it? What successes have we had with people who have gotten out of it? The same as alcohol and drugs, we have to look at support groups. Yes, more money has to be put into it because it's killing our young people.
I think that we need some more help with our mental health society. I think that we're lacking financially and with professionals that can help people with opioid addiction. I think that is actually more of a problem than the pandemic.
I think it's a very complex problem that has to be dealt with a lot of empathy for the people who are addicted. I think basic needs, do they have a place to sleep and food to eat, is a good place to start.
I think people aren't forced to take drugs, they choose to take drugs. So therefore, I think all this attention to these people who take drugs and all this money that's spent on it, and I think that's we're not spending enough money on healthcare for people who didn't take drugs.
It's such a deep question as why are so many people taking drugs? Is it a philosophical question? Is it emotional? Is it societal? And go deep into why people are doing it in the first place. When I grew up, we were told not to do it and we didn't do it. Why so many people feel the need, and why are the people who contribute to society in meaningful ways now asked to support people who are a drain on society? I think we need to look at both sides of that coin and figure out, more than just throwing more money at a bad situation, figure out why it's happening and try to figure it out from there.
Because it's at its stage where it is now, I think probably legalizing the drugs so these people get it from a doctor, right, and get good drugs. And then with that comes the stipulation that they seek treatment and get education and possibly, re-educated and get off the opiates and have their life straightened out so they don't need them. But yeah, this illegal supply of fentanyl that's being, on the streets is not a good thing.
Counseling and therapy and stuff like that, and decriminalizing it, making it so that people aren't so afraid to come forward and say, I have this issue and I need help. Because I feel like people are staying in the dark about it because they're worried that they're going to get, say, arrested or something like that. So
I think more education on the seriousness of the after effects of being involved in opioids, because I do know, I don't think people quite understand, like even fentanyl, how potent fentanyl is, because I do know it's quite a lot stronger than a lot of the other pain-killing opioids that are out there, highly addictive. And people that are taking fentanyl, as an example, are not near a lot of the antidotes that are out there to help them, such as meloxicam, I think it's called, or naloxone. Naloxone, yeah. So I think they have to realize that it's just not a regular drug, that it's something that is definitely life-threatening.
But education in the context of not becoming addicted in the first place, to help offset and to care for and look after those with mental illness and mental difficulties. And that's where my perception is, working out in community, that we haven't dealt with. When I say we, community hasn't dealt with the mental health issues stringently enough, compassionately enough, and therefore addictions sometimes occur because of that.
So I think first of all we've got to look at how you police this in the future, and secondly I think we need more needle exchange areas for that kind of thing. I don't think we're putting enough into that. I think our health care and our, which is stretched also, I think our non-government, not-for-profit programs that look at that type of thing for needle and opioid crisis type things haven't got enough resources to run properly. So we need to have that beefed up.
That's a really good question. My number one answer to that would be to have more safe injection sites. Even within COVID, those are still really important and shouldn't be put on the back burner during the pandemic. And to educate people in the community about harm reduction when it comes to drug use.
I think in terms of opioids or in any sort of drug crisis, I think we need to treat it as a public health issue and not be moralizing about it. And we need to put the same resources that we put to any other public health issue like COVID or AIDS or whatever.
I think maybe not prescribing them as much in the first place, like only in real emergency situations. And I'm not super knowledgeable about this, obviously, but yeah, I don't know, and just encouraging a more healthy lifestyle in general. I feel like I don't think doctors in Canada are as bad as in the States for overprescription of drugs, but that's my gut instinct. I don't know.
Many people will tell you how unapologetically proud they are to call themselves a Canadian. In just over 150 years of existence, Canada has established itself as a proud and peaceful nation admired around the world. So we took to the streets to ask Canadians how they feel we are perceived beyond our own borders. Our question:
how do you think Canada is viewed by other developed nations?
Oh, it's generally favorable, yes, absolutely. We're kind of nice guys, peacemakers, all that stuff, the in-between people. Not extreme left, not extreme right. Well, until now, I used to go to Britain almost every winter for a visit. And they're held very favorably, some of which is to do with World War II, when they came to the rescue, and World War I for that matter. So I think the goodwill for Canada is still very high. And all the Americans who are totally embarrassed by Trump were calling themselves Canadians when traveling in Europe, which I think is a feather in Canada's cap.
Europe generally sees us as, kin of theirs, and so like-minded in terms of a nice mix of freedom and socialism. And as far as I can tell, that seems to be, Northern Europe seems to see us as on board. Likewise for Australia. And most of my interactions with America are also the same, but of course it seems to me that there's larger spots there that are not really on board with that way of thinking, I guess.
Oh, well, I'm quite sure, and from what I've read, that people are wishing they had been in Canada when this situation occurred. And certainly in comparison to something like the United States, which is clearly the biggest denominator for us, our response is superb.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I totally agree. Yeah, I was quite impressed with the response, and I think Canada did quite well, all in all. Yeah, the troubles that we're seeing across the border now, it's clearly an example of how Canada did, in my opinion, a far better job.
No one outright says, oh yeah, look at Canada, they're ahead or they're behind. But the fact that no one's pointing at Canada and saying, oh my God, we need to do something different, to me says a lot, because there's so many countries out there where they're struggling with their response, they're struggling with having a plan, or they, like the US, don't have any plan at all other than trying to ignore it. And so not being noticed, to me, is a sign that we're doing something right.
I think for the most part we're viewed well. We're like a nice United States. I don't know. Like people, I feel like from what I've talked to, like traveling and stuff like that, they say that we're pretty polite, like we're respectful. Yeah.
Well, I would say that we definitely have a positive, positive image on the world stage, but to some degree I think that might be too positive, and we just get stereotyped as being this country that's perfect and has no problems.
I don't know, I think that's changed in the past few years when we had our change in government. I think we have been showing a bit more leadership on climate, but I think we need to do a lot more on climate to really be seen positively.
Kind of had an awakening there. Canada isn't as important in the world as we thought. We thought that Africa was looking up to Canada, and that's not so much. A lot of them don't even know where Canada is. Of course, Asia, the population is so big, we're just a source of food for them in a small way. So, other than that, we need to gain a lot of ground. We lost a lot of ground probably in the last 20 years.
In general, I think Canada still has a fairly good perception abroad, and I think that foreigners often contrast Canada with the U.S., and given the political climate in the U.S. right now, I think that actually casts Canada in a more favorable light. But again, there is a lot more that Canada could always be doing to foster international relations.
I think that a lot of countries have respect for Canada and our leaders and our people. I haven't traveled outside of Canada, but if I were to and wear a Canadian pin, I'd be a respected, tourist. I wouldn't have to hide that I'm Canadian at all.
I think they look at us as pushovers lots, but just my own opinion. I just think that we kind of go with what everybody else is doing, and that's just how we do it.
I think we're actually fairly well thought of. Traveling around the world, when you say you're Canadian, people do see that as a positive thing. They don't see this as being, we're not imperialistic, there are definitely positive things that people think about Canada when other people and countries think of us. And some of the things that we've done around the world, I think, have had a positive impact, so that's always helped.
Thanks for watching this episode of Outburst on the Cable Public Affairs channel. I'm Glenn McGuinness. If you have any comments about this show or any other show, you can find us on social media. You can also find us on our website at www.cpac.ca. It's your turn to speak up, and we're listening.